The show opens during the Tang Dynasty in China, where we see a girl named Hui Yan anxiously sitting in a room and listening to her parents' conversation. They're discussing whether or not to marry her off into a particular family. The groom's family has offered a significant amount of money and asked for the time and date of her birth. Her parents are worried because this is a one-time only offer. In the next scene, it's Hui Yan's wedding day and she's waiting in a room. Moments later, a young man named Halan enters the room wearing a mask. He admits he's also uncomfortable with the situation, but due to tradition, they need to spend the night together. When he offers her an apple, she refuses to eat it, but he states he will wait all night if he has to. Hearing this, she gives up and eats the apple. She then asks if he can't see, so he takes off his mask to show his eyes, which are a strange shade of blue. He apologizes for her parents selling her off, but she claims it's okay because she's ugly. However, he states that although he can't see, he can judge from her voice that she's beautiful. The scene then cuts to many years later, and we see that the couple has become older. Halan can now see at night, and he credits his wife, Hui Yan, for this. He then swears that he will continue to look for her. Following this, we're taken to the 21st century, where a girl named Pippi wakes up from a dream. Meanwhile, Halan is standing on the rooftop on the other side of the city. His two assistants soon arrive and confirm that his apartment and documents are ready. Next, we learn that a long time ago, aliens from a planet called the Skyfox settled on Earth to escape a galactic crisis. They looked just like humans and adapted to this world. People were once curious about them, so a scholar recorded stories about the love between humans and foxes. However, as time passed, people became afraid of the Fox clan. To avoid trouble, the clan started hiding their true identities and blending in with humans. It turns out that Halan is the priest of this fox tribe, and he is over 900 years old. On the other hand, Pippi is the reincarnation of his past wife, Hui Yan, so he's on a mission to find her and win her over. Later, when Halan arrives at his new home, his two assistants start to show him pictures and information about Pippi. As they start to talk about her boyfriend, our hero claims he doesn't want to hear about it since that dude will be leaving her life soon. He then asks his assistants to check Pippi's schedule because he wants to see her tomorrow. The next morning, Pippi tells Tian that she had the same dream again, the one that she's been having since high school. This leaves the two girls wondering what the dream could possibly mean. Later, they go to meet Pippi's boyfriend, Jialin. The three of them appear to be close friends that seem to hang out together. Even now, they're having a fun conversation, but Pippi suddenly notices that her boyfriend has more things in common with Tian than with her. Later, as Pippi is walking down the road, Halan approaches from the other side. We learn that he can't see during the day and has to hide his fox eyes, so he wears sunglasses all the time. With the help of his two assistants, he approaches Pippi and asks for help. But unfortunately, she thinks he's a beggar and gives him a pack of nuts. This shocks the trio, as it was not what they expected. However, our hero suddenly clarifies that he's just looking for directions to the subway. She is completely embarrassed and agrees to take him there. Seconds later, a thief snatches Pippi's wallet and runs away. She chases after him through the streets, but he proves to be too elusive. The thief then steals a motorcycle, and it appears he's about to escape. However, right at that moment, Halan shows up in his car with his assistants. They then pursue the thief and eventually manage to corner him in a street. After getting her purse back, Pippi expresses gratitude towards Halan for his help. She claims that he's an angel who saved her day. In response, our hero gives her his business card, and they part ways. Days later, Jalin's birthday's approaching and Pippi wants to buy him a special gift. So she goes to a fancy store where she decides to get a shirt for him. But there's a problem. She doesn't know her boyfriend's size. As she's checking out the different shirts in the store, she notices a person with a similar build to Jialin and discreetly tries to measure his shoulders. However, it turns out to be Halan, and the two excitedly greet each other. He then helps her by trying the shirt on, but when he finds out that it's for her boyfriend, he gets upset. Unfortunately, when it's time to pay, none of Pippi's credit cards work, so she goes downstairs to withdraw some money. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Halan buys all the white shirts in the store. Pippi is livid when she finds out about this, so she chases after him. In the process, she accidentally removes his sunglasses, revealing his strange fox eyes. This shocks our heroine, but before she can ask him anything, quickly covers his eyes and leaves. That evening, when his eyesight returns, Halan burns all the white shirts one by one. Meanwhile, his assistants look at him and comment that this is the first time they've seen him act so jealous. The following day, while he's working out, his assistant approaches him and hands him contact lenses to hide his eyes. Halan then says that Pippi might not be feeling well because she saw his eyes. To help her, he cuts his hand and lets the blood drip onto an apple and instructs his assistant to give it to her. Meanwhile, Pippi is in the bathroom at her workplace feeling nauseous and unable to stop vomiting. She later visits her best friend Xiaoju's cafe, where the two assistants also arrive and order sandwiches. They offer her the apple claiming it's good for her, but she declines and leaves. She then goes to see a doctor, but all the test results reveal that she's perfectly fine. That evening, Pippi goes to Jialin's house for his birthday dinner. His mother opens the door, but she's clearly disappointed to see her. It's evident that she wants her son to date Tian instead. Later, a sick Pippi goes to the bathroom and starts vomiting. Jialin's mother notices this, but she shows no concern for her well-being and instead asks her to leave. Upset, our heroine decides to go home, despite her boyfriend asking her to stay the night. The following day, Pippi's company decides to interview a mysterious woman named Qian Hua, who is a wealthy businesswoman. Her main business is beauty and skincare products, but very little is known about her personal life. It turns out that she's a member of the Fox clan who serves as Helan's right-hand woman. In the next scene, we meet one of Pippi's co-workers named Wang, who's a longtime employee of the company. She's a bitch and is always nasty to Pippi whenever she has a chance. Later, she's given the task of interviewing Qian Hua. Wang pretends to be a fan and goes to meet her in her office. However, Qian Hua doesn't like her attitude, so she insults her and sends her away. When the other employees learn that Qian Hua is difficult to deal with, they turn their attention to Helan. As per their knowledge, he is also rich and one of the associates of Qian Hua, but not much else is known about his personal life. So, Pippi is ordered by her boss to discreetly observe him and take some pictures. Not knowing what else to do, she goes to his house and hangs on a tree to find him. Moments later, Helan shows up and asks what she's doing there. Seeing him makes her so nervous that her nose starts bleeding and she passes out. He then takes her into his home and feeds her an apple to make her feel better. Sometime later, Pippi wakes up and goes to the pool where she sees Helan lying on a chair. Thinking he's asleep, she comments on how handsome he is, but he suddenly opens his eyes, startling her. A confused Pippi asks how he saw her because she thought he was blind. He then clarifies that he has a condition which allows him to see only during the night. Hearing this, she's perplexed and thinks he's a very peculiar person. She then asks to conduct an interview with him, to which he gladly agrees. The next morning when Pippi wakes up, Qian Hu greets her and shows her a huge selection of clothing, shoes, and makeup to choose from. She also gives her an invitation to an auction of cultural relics and suggests she attend it with Helan. Afterward, Pippi chooses a skirt and high heels that are different from her usual style and leaves for work. In the meantime, Jialin and Tian are getting very close, even though he's committed to Pippi. Turns out he was planning to go to the US for studies, and Pippi is applying to join him. However, he doesn't seem to care about her effort and just wants to get close to her friend. That afternoon, Pippi is at a cafe when Helan's assistants approach her with a box containing a dress. They suggest she wear it when she attends the event with their boss. Our heroine is a bit hesitant to accept, but she eventually does after their relentless persuasion. We then see a flashback of their past lives when Helan puts a bracelet on Hui Yan's wrist. The orb on the bracelet sparkles in the moonlight. He then tells her that in their family, this signifies that they will be together forever. In the present, Pippi wakes up to find all her US visa papers scattered on the floor. As she gathers them, she notices the dress Helan gave her to wear to the auction. The following day, she wears the dress and arrives at the event. She sits next to Helan and claims that she's only seen such lavish events in the movies. She then asks why he invited her, and he simply smiles and says that she will find out when the night is over. During the auction, Pippi is very interested in the items being bid on, and Helan tells her the stories behind each one of them. She asks how he knows so much, to which he jokingly replies that he has met all of those people in the past. Our heroine obviously thinks he's lying, but he claims he hasn't lied to her in this lifetime, which confuses her. Later, we learn that Helan is planning to recover a precious orb that belonged to Hui Yan. He has been looking for it for a long time, but this item is not for sale. When the experts examine the orb's authenticity, Helan takes the opportunity to exchange it for a fake. Later, as he and Pippi are leaving the event, he stops her and shows her the orb necklace he had stolen. She immediately recognizes it from the auction and asks if he stole it. He tells her that the owner will be paid double the price because the necklace is very special to him. He then puts it around her neck, but to his dismay, it doesn't glow. This makes him very sad, so he tells her to go home by bus. Pippi then decides to meet up with Xiaoju, and the two girls end up drinking. Xiaoju mentions that she smells good and asks what perfume she's wearing. Pippi says she's not wearing any, so it must be the necklace. In a flashback, we see that in every timeline when Helan gave Pippi the orb to wear, it shined brightly. However, this time it hasn't shined because she still hasn't fallen in love with him. The next morning, Zhao, who is the second priest of the Fox clan, comes to visit Helan. The two are revealed to be brothers, but they aren't on good terms because Zhao wants to rule the Fox clan alone. He tells Helan that their father, whom he hasn't seen in hundreds of years, wants to see him. However, he refuses, saying he left the family to find his love. Meanwhile, Pippi is at her office preparing for her upcoming interview with Halan. She searches the internet trying to find some clue about him, but there's just no information available. On the other hand, Halan is also nervous about the interview with Pippi and has no idea what to wear. So he summons his assistant for help, and after trying numerous clothes, he eventually decides to wear casual attire. That evening, Pippi arrives at a fancy restaurant to conduct her interview. He suggests that they have a meal first, but she states she's only there for the interview. When she asks about his profession, he claims he doesn't have any income sources, so she assumes he comes from a wealthy family. Pippi then asks what he generally eats, and he responds that he eats flowers. This annoys her because she thinks he's jerking her chain. Still, she continues with the interview and asks about his hometown. Halan says that he comes from a planet called Skyfog. When she asks if he's an alien, he responds that he's a Fog. Having enough, Pippi gets frustrated and excuses herself. Later, as she's on the balcony, Halan comes over and asks if he scared her. He explains that he just wanted her to know the truth. He says that humans usually don't believe in things they don't understand, and asks if she wants to experience something strange. He then takes her head and places it on his chest so she can hear his heartbeat. Pippi then listens closely and shockingly realizes that his heart beats only 3 times per minute. Halan then asks if she believes him now, but she's thinking he's suffering from some sort of health problem and advises him to see a doctor. Later, as she's on her way home, she's harassed by some drunk people. However, a mysterious man in black shows up and protects her from these guys. Pippi tries to thank her savior, but the man leaves without saying anything. Meanwhile, in the same restaurant, we see Jialin and Tian on a date. The two finally admit that they like each other and decide to be a couple. The following day, Halan is upset about Pippi's sudden departure because in every lifetime she believed everything he said to her. However, his assistant advises him that times are different now and he shouldn't have bombarded her with the truth like that. Afterward, Pippi is at a cafe when one of Halan's assistants comes up to her. She tries to ignore him, but he stops her and apologizes for her boss's behavior last night. She says it's okay and tells him that Halan must have a heart problem. However, the assistant laughs and mentions that his boss has invited her to meet again. This makes Pippi very nervous and she doesn't know how to respond. But right at that moment, her friend arrives and takes her away. That afternoon, Pippi searches for her boyfriend everywhere but fails to find him. On the way, she meets Tian instead and starts talking about her current situation. The latter then says that she's getting late for a nightclub party, so she has to leave. Hearing this, our heroine politely asks if she can join too, and Tian reluctantly agrees. That evening, while heading to the club, Pippi goes to a roadside stall to buy a drink. Turns out the man selling them is also a hidden fox. He sees the orb on her necklace and bows his head to ask for her blessing. She's confused by his behavior, but touches his head anyway. She then asks if Halan instructed him to do this, but the man claims that he is their lord, and they cannot say his name. He then tells her that the person who used to own this orb was Halan's true love. Afterwards, she enters the bar, but Tian promptly joins her other friends, leaving her alone. Pippi then sits there by herself and begins to feel a little nervous, as if she's never been to a place like this before. The scene then shifts to hundreds of years ago, during a time which Halan's eyes had already gained the ability to see at night. One day, Qianhua was being hunted by some humans, and at that moment, Halan appeared just in time to save her. Because of this incident, she fell in love with him, even though she knew he only had Huiyan in his heart. In the present, Pippa is at the bar when Jialin arrives, making her happy. He tries to tell her about his new relationship, but Tian interrupts their conversation and takes him away. She then tells him that Pippi is in a foul mood today and advises him to share this news at another time. Moments later, Halan also appears at the same bar, which startles Pippi. She tries to stay away from him, but he follows her and attempts to talk to her. She then screams in horror, prompting her friends to rush to her. Jialin claims that he's Pippi's boyfriend and tells Halan to leave her alone. This makes our hero angry, and he blows up the light bulbs. Seeing this, his 2 assistants grab him and take him away. That evening, when Pippi returns home, she conducts some research on foxes and discovers they're most afraid of realgar. So the next day, she buys some realgar from the drugstore and visits the same cafe. There, Halan's 2 assistants are present as usual, and they try to chat with her. However, when they catch scent of the realgar, they become scared. Pippi approaches them and asks if she can meet their boss. One of the assistants is very reluctant, fearing she plans to hurt him. However, the other one agrees and promises to relay the message to Halan. In a flashback from 100 years ago, we see that Halan had abandoned his responsibilities and the entire family to search for Huiyan. The family elders felt it was inappropriate and decided to have someone bring him back. Qianhua was already his fiancée at the time. His father, Priest Aoki, hoped that he would take the position of chief priest in the future. Therefore, Qianhua promised that she would follow him and bring him back to the Fox clan. This pisses Zhao off because he's madly in love with Qianhua. He also harbors resentment because he's the adopted son of Priest Aoki and therefore could never be his successor. In the present, Halan eagerly anticipates his meeting with Pippi. His assistant advises him that it's not the right time and that she might hurt him, but he insists that love requires sacrifice. A little while later, he arrives at the restaurant to meet Pippi and doesn't seem to mind that she brought Realgar. She then says that it's inappropriate to accept the necklace because she has a boyfriend whom she loves deeply. Therefore, she asks him not to bother her anymore. Hearing this, our hero gets mad, so she takes out the Realgar from her bag and puts his finger in it. In just a few seconds, the skin and flesh where the Realgar touches him tears his skin apart. This finally makes Pippi realize that he is indeed a fox. She quickly tries to bandage him, but he withdraws his fingers. He then removes the necklace from her neck and walks away without looking back. That evening, it's Tian's graduation club performance, so Jian brings her a large bouquet backstage, making her happy. After he leaves, Pippi also arrives with a small bouquet for her friend. She asks who gave her such a big bouquet, but Tian claims that it's from just a friend. As the two engage in conversation, Pippi reveals that she's decided to quit her job and start learning English so she can accompany Jialin to the US. Hearing this, Tian feels very guilty and is speechless. Meanwhile, at Halan's house, Qianhua carefully bandages his wounds. She gazes at him and gradually leans on his shoulder. Zhao, who is observing this from afar, gets so mad that he causes a power outage all over the city. Much to her dismay, this interrupts Tian's live performance as well. After a while, Jialin finds her and the two have a private conversation. She contemplates ending their affair as she feels guilty about cheating on her friend. However, before she can say anything to him, Jialin surprises her by asking her if she wants to accompany him to the US. The following day, Pippi submits her resignation letter to the company, thinking that she's going to the US with her boyfriend. Her boss tries to retain her, but to no avail. Meanwhile, Jialin finds out that his college has not received any documents he sent to the United States, so he has to fly there as soon as possible. He then begins to pack his luggage, and Tian also arrives to help him. During this time, he asks her if she's willing to go with him, and she happily says yes. Moments later, Pippi also shows up at the house, so Tian quickly hides with a book. Inside it, she finds a letter written by Pippi and Jialin when they were children to their future selves. This makes her feel ashamed of herself, so she puts the letter back in its original state. Meanwhile, Jialin claims to have found some urgent work and sends Pippi out of the house. The following morning, our heroine goes to the coffee shop early to find Xiaoju and tell her that she's resigned. She claims that she wants to live a peaceful life abroad with Jialin, but he hasn't mentioned anything about it. Later, she goes to Halan's house to check on him. She gives him some fresh flowers as food and apologizes awkwardly. She then tells him that his interview will not be published because she has resigned from her job. As the two delve deeper into conversation, she begins to ask Halan more questions about the Fox clan. Pippi claims that she read the foxes used to eat human livers and asks if that's true. He replies that 100 years ago, the Southern Fox tribe made a rule to ban human liver. She then asks if he's ever eaten human liver, and this question makes him a bit upset. He admits that he had involuntarily eaten it many years ago. Hearing this, Pippi suddenly gets scared, so she says goodbye and leaves. In the next scene, she arrives at the mall to watch movies with her friends, but to her shock, she notices Jialin and Tian having lunch. With trembling hands, she calls both of them one by one and asks where they are. As expected, both of them lie to her, claiming they're at work. This enrages our heroine, so she approaches them, catching them off guard. Pippi asks Jialin why he didn't tell her about this earlier and has wasted her time. He replies that they're not compatible, and he's known this for a long time. He apologizes and claims that he and Tian have decided to be together. Pippi is devastated and rushes to the elevator with tears in her eyes. That evening, she goes to a bar to drown her sorrows. Unfortunately, she catches the attention of a bald man who spikes her wine and encourages her to drink it. Pippi drinks it without hesitation and soon falls unconscious. The bald man then takes her out of the bar, and this incident is witnessed by a nearby beverage vendor, the same vendor who received a blessing from Pippi earlier. He quickly calls Halan and informs him of the situation. Pippi is taken to an abandoned factory by the bald man. Soon she wakes up in a daze and tries to stand up and leave, but he grabs her and forces her to the ground. He begins tearing her clothes off while Pippi screams for help. Just then, Halan shows up and knocks the bald man away with a wave of his hand. He then picks up Pippi and takes her away. Later at home, Halan places her on the bed, but she misses Jialin and begins to cry. Seeing this, he feels very bad and gently wipes away her tears. The scene then shifts to a flashback of their past lives, where we see the moment Helan regained his night vision. He wanted to tell Hui on the news, but his father told him to forget the human woman. The old man then says that she was just a bowl of medicine and he shouldn't have gotten too attached. At this moment, Helan shockingly realizes that he had actually eaten his beloved's liver to regain his eyesight. Devastated, he runs to the river to see Huiyan for the last time. She was still breathing, and she was thrilled she could finally see him. She then asked him not to feel bad and passed away with a smile on her face. Back in the present, Pippi wakes up still very depressed. She asks Helan what she did wrong that her boyfriend left her for another woman. He says that she and her boyfriend have done nothing wrong. He then admits that he likes her, and since she's now single, she can give him a chance. However, Pippi refuses, saying she won't be able to fall in love with anyone ever again. In the next scene, Jialin and Tian are at the airport preparing to depart for the US. However, he's still concerned about Pippi, so he sends her many text messages. Moments later, she arrives at the airport and notices that the two are about to board the plane. She decides not to approach them and simply sends a safe journey text to Jialin. Upon receiving the text, he calls her multiple times, but she doesn't answer. Afterward, Pippi gets a call from a restaurant where she's reserved a table for Valentine's Day. Although the place is far beyond her budget, she had planned to spend the special day there with Jialin. When she asks the restaurant to cancel her booking, they inform her that it will cost her more money. So with very little option, she calls Helan and asks if he would like to go on a date with her, to which he immediately agreed. On the day of their date, Pippi goes to the mall and buys a beautiful dress. She then goes to a beauty salon with Helan for a makeover. When she comes out, he is stunned to see her. After this, they go to the restaurant, but Pippi seems very awkward and upset. To cheer her up, he endures discomfort and eats human food. This worries Pippi, but he assures her that sometimes it's okay to eat human food. Moments later, he goes to the bathroom and vomits out everything he just ate. After the meal, the two of them go on a Ferris wheel that Pippi had been dying to go on. From there, they watch lanterns light up, revealing the most beautiful night view in the city. However, neither of them is happy, and Helan feels awkward watching her sad because of some other guy. After they get off the ride, light rain begins to fall, so Helan holds up an umbrella. Pippi then takes out the letter she and Jialin had written as children and asks him to read it aloud. As he begins to read it, she breaks down into tears. Before he can complete it, she stops him and takes the letter from his hands. She then walks away in the rain, tearing up the letter. In the following days, Helan feels very strange as his mind is filled with thoughts of Pippi. On the other hand, she spends all day in bed, ignoring the world around her. Xiaoju feels very bad for her best friend, so she takes her out to cheer her up. First, they go shopping, but when Pippi sees Jialin's favorite brand, she feels even worse. Afterwards, the girls go out to eat, where she eats so many sweets that she ends up vomiting. Xiaoju then takes her to work out, thinking it will make her feel better. However, this also turns out to be futile, as Pippi struggles to maintain her energy and almost collapses. Later, Xiaoju returns to her coffee shop feeling frustrated. Helan's assistants also arrive, and the three begin discussing how to lift their mood. After some brainstorming, they come up with the idea of booking concert tickets for her favorite singer, Augie. Xiaoju sends one ticket to Pippi, while Helan's assistant takes the other one for him. In the next scene, Pippi arrives at the concert thrilled to see her favorite singer. She also notices Helan standing in the distance, looking at her. Aki's singing is sensational, and it causes her to drift into a fantasy. She tearfully walks through the crowd, throws herself into Helan's arms. He also hugs her quietly, as if he would never let her go again. However, as the song ends, she comes back to her senses and greets him with a smile. After the concert, Pippi finally feels much better. She and Helan walk outside and she apologizes for what happened in their last meeting. She also mentions that Aki is her favorite musician and continues to praise him. Just then, Aki approaches them and asks Helan for a blessing. It turns out that he's also a member of the Fox tribe. Pippi tells him that his songs are beautiful, and Aki thanks her for her support. However, he clarifies that he didn't write the lyrics to his songs and points to Helan. Turns out the lyrics were written by our hero hundreds of years ago when he was missing Huiyan. After this, Helan and Pippi walk outside while chatting. A passerby sees them enter an alleyway and immediately makes a phone call. Soon, a gang on motorcycles stops in front of them. These are accomplices of the same thug who snatched Pippi's wallet before. He apparently had broken bones after being thrown down last time, so he has come back to seek revenge. However, Helan easily kicks their ass with his powers. As all of this is happening, a thug catches Pippi and holds her at knife point. Our hero quickly throws the man away, but she's still scratched by the knife. So Helan places his lips on the wounded area and instantly heals it. He then takes out the orb necklace again and puts it on her. He tells her that with this orb, he can sense whenever she's in danger and can help her. This time, Pippi gladly accepts it, which makes him very happy. After returning home and taking a shower, she gazes at the orb and thinks for a while. At this moment, we see a fox demon flower behind her, gradually opening more petals. The demon fox flower has 12 petals in total, and when she gets all of them, she will have to die again. A few days later, Halan takes Pippi to a Fox clan gathering, where she feels quite out of place. Some of the girls discover that her orb is a gift from their lord Halan, so they take turns offering drink. Pippi, who's not skilled in handling such situations, quickly becomes overwhelmed by alcohol. When she gets too drunk, a fox woman named Sumi helps her and takes her to an upstairs room to rest. Meanwhile, another woman informs Halan that Pippi isn't feeling well. Worried, he rushes to check on her, and as soon as he enters the room, Sumi locks the door behind them. Turns out that tonight is the night of a sacred full moon, which occurs only every 10 years, and the Fox clan can only reproduce on this day. Furthermore, within the clan, the priest must get it on first before the others can. Therefore, Sumi and her friends have deliberately locked the two together. Inside the room, a drunken Pippi stares at Halan and kisses him passionately, which shocks him. The orb necklace finally shines, and the rest of the Fox clan can feel it as well. However, seconds later, she ends up collapsing unconscious. Outside, Sumi is still waiting for Halan to finish his work. However, he gets very angry and orders her to open the door. When she realizes that Pippi is human, Sumi realizes her mistake and lets them out. Turns out that if a human kisses a fox without any preparation, they can die in severe cases. In the aftermath of this incident, Halan rushes Pippi to the hospital, but the medical professionals are unable to treat her. He then tries to save her with his unique injection from the fox tribe, but the doctors object. In desperation, Xiaoju holds a scalpel against her neck and threatens to harm herself if the doctors don't let Halan do his work. As a result, everyone backs off, and our hero successfully administers the injection. Moments later, Pippi slowly opens her eyes, and everyone breathes a sigh of relief. The doctor then mistakes Halan for an experienced surgeon and is awestruck, so he asks him to guide in similar cases. Halan can't refuse, so he looks through the pile of medical cases that the doctor has pulled out. Coincidentally, a patient very similar to Pippi came in that day, but he died because the doctor couldn't accurately diagnose him. In the meantime, Tian, who had followed Jialin into the United States, finds that life is not as beautiful as she had imagined. Jialin is busy with his own things, so he leaves early in the morning and comes back late at night. Tian, on the other hand, spends all day in the house acting like a housewife, cooking and cleaning for him. Furthermore, she worries that he might cheat on her just like he did with Pippi, and becomes increasingly anxious. Back at the hospital, Halan completes the discharge procedures for Pippi and reveals that their kiss injured her by the Fox clan's aura. Now the two must stay in close contact, otherwise her hair will fall out and her skin will ulcerate. He advises her not to go home for a while and just to stay at his place. However, she thinks he's just bluffing in order to keep her close and refuses his offer. The following morning when Pippi wakes up, she is shocked to see her hair all over the bed. When she checks the mirror, she even discovers a bald patch. Horrified, she realizes that Halan was actually telling the truth. She immediately rushes to his house and asks for his help. From then on, she becomes a shadow and doesn't leave his side for a second. When he stands up, she stands up too, and when he pours water, she follows him. Even when he wants to go to the toilet, she is reluctant to leave him alone. When night comes, Pippi falls into a deep sleep and Halan sits beside her all night. The next day she wakes up and sees that her hair has become very long. This makes her very happy, so she agrees to live with him for some time. After this, the two go to her house to ask permission from her parent. Pippi claims that he is her boss and she must stay with him for a while because of a project. Seeing that Halan is rich and handsome, her mother agrees without any hesitation. She then begins packing her daughter's luggage to send her away, leaving everyone in shock. That night, Pippi falls asleep on Halan's bed while he lies in a nearby chair. When he falls asleep, she starts writing a reinstatement application for her old job. After writing all night, she's still not satisfied, so the following day she goes directly to her former company. At this time, the company's in a frenzied state because the chief editor is sweating profusely and is about to give birth. She somehow assigns tasks to all her employees, but still needs someone to take her to the hospital, and everyone has a heavy workload. When Pippi arrives and sees her boss's condition, she offers to take her to the hospital. A little while later, her boss gives birth to a healthy child. She's pleased that Pippi is returning to work and suggests that she go to graduate school, which would be beneficial to her dream of becoming a journalist. Pippi falls into thought because she feels timid about facing graduate students. Later, she discusses it with Halan, who is very excited and decides to accompany her to class. However, due to his good looks, he ends up attracting the attention of all the girls. That evening, Pippi and Halan spend some time together and he shows her how to write his name in many languages. Since he's lived for hundreds of years, he's proficient in poetry, arts, and many foreign languages. Our heroine is jealous of his knowledge, so she takes out her English books and starts studying. Halan says that there's a dictionary in his room, so she goes through his collection. To her surprise, she accidentally stumbles upon many portraits that he drew of Huiyan. In many of these portraits, the women all look the same, but their clothes are different. This once again makes Pippi jealous, so she takes out her mobile phone and takes several pictures of Halan's work. The following day, she meets up with Sumi and shows her the picture she took. The latter bursts out laughing upon seeing them and reveals that the woman is actually Huiyan, the past version of Pippi. Our heroine obviously doesn't believe this, so Sumi tells her the story of Halan and Huiyan. 900 years ago, Halan was born, but because he was a human-fox hybrid, he was in feeble health and had eye problems. Later, an expert told Priest Aoki that if he found a human girl with a pure yang in her horoscope, he should make her fall in love with Halan. Then, if he consumed the girl's liver, his eye condition could be cured. So Priest Aoki found Huiyan for this purpose. He then deceived his son into eating her liver as medicine. However, after her death, Halan was devastated and could not forgive his father for his actions. So he fled to the south, and when he became stronger, he launched a war against Priest Aoki. Eventually, the Fox clan was divided into north and south, with Halan becoming the rightful priest in charge of the southern Fox clan. Aoki then named his other son, Zhao, as the priest commanding the northern Fox clan. In the present, Pippi begins crying and she sympathizes with everyone in the story. However, she still doesn't believe that she was Huiyan in her past life. That evening, Pippi becomes consumed by thoughts and assumes Halan has somebody else in his heart. This feels unfair to her because she has fallen in love with him wholeheartedly. So she packs her bags and decides to return home. However, upon her arrival, she is stopped by her mother at the door, who asks her for some money. Mom then timidly admits that she has borrowed nearly 10,000 won from Jialin. This angers our heroine a lot, but she has no choice but to repay the money. So she reluctantly decides to look for a part-time job. Meanwhile, Halan is confused as to why Pippi left suddenly. He begins to follow her everywhere, but she chooses to ignore him. One evening, while she's working at the bar, a thug approaches her and starts to behave inappropriately. He blackmails her to have a drink with him, or else he'll get her fired from this job. Our innocent girl feels she can't refuse and is about to comply with his demands. But at that moment, Halan appears, grabs a wine glass and drinks it all in one gulp. This angers the thug, and a verbal argument breaks out between the two men. When the manager intervenes, Halan bows down and apologizes to the thug. Although he could have easily taught the man a lesson, he chooses not to do so for the sake of Pippi. She is moved by the gesture and wonders if he really loves her or Huiyan. All of a sudden, she recalls that Halan can't drink alcohol, so she ignores the manager's calls and puts down her work to chase him. Sure enough, he's puking violently in a nearby corner while holding onto the wall. Pippi quickly steps forward to take care of him and feels emotional. Finally, she tells him the reason why she left home and has been ignoring him. Halan is overjoyed to learn that she is resentful because that means she loves him. He then embraces her and asks her to marry him, which she happily accepts. Later, when he reaches home, he realizes that Qianhua has been waiting for him anxiously. The two then sit down for a conversation, and she says that the time has come for Pippi to sacrifice herself for him. The only way to make her fox demon flower vanish and for her to live is if Halan is willing to sacrifice his life. Our hero makes the obvious choice and decides that he will give up himself for his beloved. Qianhua is devastated and hopes that he will calmly analyze the pros and cons of his decision. She tells him that Pippi has many years and many reincarnations, but he does not. There is no cure for her in this life, but they may find one in the next one. However, he says that at this moment he loves the current Pippi, so he wants to live and die for her. Qianhua reluctantly accepts his decision and then breaks down into tears. Elsewhere, we see a famous actress named Fong, who is also a member of the Fox clan. She's in the hospital looking at her lovely son in the incubator. Since the child is a human-fox hybrid, he's very weak and on the verge of death. Just then, she's approached by a man named Bojong. He tells her about a girl named Pippi and assures her that by taking out her liver and making soup, she could save her child's life. Fong doesn't believe this, so he explains how her liver helped regain Halan's eyesight hundreds of years ago. He also claims that since Pippi is marked by the fox demon flower, she will not live to be 25 years old anyway. Even if she dies, she can be reborn, but this child cannot. Hearing this, Fong begins to tremble and is left speechless. Meanwhile, Halan arrives at Pippi's home to formally propose marriage. He talks with her parents and offers them a lot of money and assets for their daughter. However, Mom is not dazzled by all of this. She admits that Pippi is like her father, and they are often wronged and taken advantage of because of their kindness. So what she needs is not a rich husband, but a man who will protect her and support her. Halan responds by promising to take care of her daughter with all his might. This finally convinces Mom, and she agrees to their relationship. But she advises them to get engaged first so that they can get to know each other better. The following day, Jialin returns to China and goes straight to Pippi's workplace to meet her. He asks her if she missed him and asks for another chance for their relationship. However, she angrily states that she doesn't love him anymore. She then asks why he's here and asks about his girlfriend. With a sad expression on his face, he reveals that he and Tian have broken up. Later, Qianhua arranges a private meeting with Pippi to tell her the entire truth. She reveals everything about the demon fox flower and Helan's plans to sacrifice himself. She admits that she can tolerate him loving another woman, but she cannot bear the thought of him dying. Hearing this, Pippi is stunned, and both girls start crying while cursing the injustice of fate. She then thinks for a while and dials Jialin's number, asking for his help with something. In the next scene, Pippi meets with Helan and abruptly says she wants to break up with him. He's confused by her sudden decision, but she claims that Jialin is back in her life. She then returns to him the orb necklace and leaves. Upon reaching a bit further, she runs into Jialin's arms with tears in her eyes. Our hero notices them from a distance and is left entirely heartbroken. In the meantime, Pippi's co-worker Wang meets with Zhao for an interview. Afterward, the two share a meal, during which he falsely claims that Qianhua's company uses animals for experiments. He then provides her with a USB drive containing information to support his statement. This delights Wang as she finally has a chance to expose Qianhua and gain the upper hand. The following day, the news spreads like wildfire, attracting a lot of public attention. Most of the cosmetics contain fox formulas, so if they're sent to Quality Supervision Bureau, it will have disastrous consequences for the Fox clan. Due to the unavoidable trouble, Qianhua has no choice but to reluctantly give up her career. People begin criticizing and insulting her while Zhao watches the news on TV. Although he feels sorry for her, he doesn't regret it because he wants to eliminate the forces around Helan one by one. Meanwhile, a heartbroken Helan is refusing to eat or drink and has locked himself in his room. This leaves his assistants really worried, and they curse at Pippi for being so heartless. Soon, Qianhua arrives there and sadly tells them what happened to her company. She reveals that the news had been spread by Wang, a colleague of Pippi. Hearing this, the assistants believe that Pippi deliberately approached Helan to get exclusive information. Now that she succeeded, she dumped him mercilessly. However, Qianhua, who knows the actual truth, tells them to shut up. Later, we see an utterly distraught Pippi in her room. She feels awful, but can't do anything to help the situation. Soon her phone rings, and it turns out to be Fong. This Fox member hasn't appeared in the public eye for a long time, and she invites Pippi to arrange an interview with her. Hearing this, our girl becomes excited as an interview with someone so popular as Fong can definitely boost her career. The following day, Pippi meets with Jialin for coffee and repays him the money her mother had borrowed from him. She then leaves for her interview with Fong, but accidentally drops her wallet behind. Pippi later arrives at an abandoned restaurant that Fong used to run. Soon, they begin the interview and everything goes well for the first few minutes. But then, the evil foxwoman suddenly takes out a dagger and drips it with her blood. She points it at our poor girl and tries to murder her. Terrified, Pippi crawls away, but Fong continues to follow her like a bloodthirsty demon. She manages to scratch her palm with the dagger and attacks her again. Right at that moment, Jialin, who's come to return the wallet, witnesses the scene and immediately fights with Fong. But sadly, he's no match for her, and the woman ends up plunging her dagger into his abdomen. Fong then attempts to finish him off, but Pippi knocks her down in the nick of time and helps Jialin escape. She then rushes him to the hospital, but the doctors are clueless about how to help him. So she calls Helan's assistants and pleads for their help. The two then rush to the scene to assist her, but when they learn that Fong is behind all this, they claim there's no hope. Turns out that once the blood of a fox clan enters the human body, the person will undoubtedly die. The two cannot save Jialin, so they bring him to Helan's home. Faced with Pippi's request, our hero has no choice but to help, even if the person he is helping is his love rival. Pippi also learns from his assistants that the procedure is dangerous and that Helan will lose a lot of energy. Still, he proceeds and starts the intricate procedure. After a long and painful night, Jialin is finally out of danger, but Helan has become very weak. When our girl comes to check on him, she finds him lying on the bed, covered in cold sweat. She lies beside him and hugs him tightly. One thing leads to another, and the two end up making love. Later at dawn, Helan wakes up to see Pippi standing alone in front of the window. She tells him that what they did was just a one-time thing because she wanted to repay him for saving Jialin. He understands why she's doing this and puts the orb necklace on her. The orb unexpectedly shines, which means she loves him a lot. He then says that hopefully she can live her full life, even if he's not there. Our girl is almost in tears upon hearing this, and she hugs him tightly. This marks the reconciliation point between the two, and they decide to get married as soon as possible. In the next scene, Bojang meets with Fong with a startling revelation. He explains that he originally wanted to use her, but now that she's failed, she is of no use to him. This enrages Fong and she begins to yell at him, but he silences her by brutally killing her. Just then, Zhao shows up and it's revealed that Bojang is his right-hand man. He appears to be angry at the unnecessary killing, but Bojang claims that in order to achieve great things, one must be either a purely good person or an evil person. In the meantime, Pippi and Helan embrace every moment they have together and begin preparing for the wedding. News of his upcoming marriage also reaches priest Aoki, who comes to meet him in person. Helan apologizes to his father for giving him trouble all these years and for bringing nothing but misfortune to the family. In response, priest Aoki also apologizes and admits that what he did with Huiyan was very wrong. The father and son then finally let go of their differences and reconcile. After this, priest Aoki hands over the key symbolizing the supreme leader of the Fox clan to Helan. Elsewhere, Wang meets with Zhao and confronts him about the false information he provided on King Hua's company. She asserts that despite being a gossip reporter, she has certain principles. Zhao promises to give her big news and takes her to Helan's house. There, he shows her several portraits of Huiyan. As he tells their story, Wang gets excited because she believes the news will boost her career. She assumes that Zhao must genuinely like her due to the way he helps her. However, he suddenly stabs her in the chest, killing her on the spot. Sometime later, a group of police officers receive a tip-off and head to the place where Wang's body has been discovered. Meanwhile, priest Aoki meets with Zhao and has a private conversation with him. He warns him against interfering with Helan and Pippi's wedding, claiming that they've already been through a lot. He also apologizes for treating him differently all these years. Hearing this, Zhao doesn't say much. He just hopes that his father will give him the key to make him the supreme ruler. However, priest Aoki admits that he has already given the key to Helan. He also confesses that both his sons are actually adopted and they have no blood relation. This news comes as a shock to Zhao, and in a fit of rage, he ends up killing his father as well. In the next scene, Pippi and Helan finally get married in front of a small audience. They exchange vows, share sweet kisses, and accept everyone's blessings. Unfortunately, the happy moment doesn't last long as a bunch of cops suddenly storm the venue and take the couple away for the murder of Wang. Afterward, Qianhua and Xiaoju, along with Helan's two assistants, gather to discuss the dire situation. Sumi also arrives there with the shocking news that priest Aoki and Fong are dead. She reveals that everyone thinks Helan is the killer. Hearing this, Qianhua figures out that Zhao must be responsible for all this. She knows that he's desperate to get the key of the chief priest. Even if he inherits the position of leader for the Fox clan, it won't be enough. The group then realize that since Helan has the key, his life is now in danger. Moreover, he has become much weaker after using all his powers to heal Jilin. Qianhua then suddenly comes up with an idea. She reveals that there's a sacred tree in front of the Fox King's tomb. It's been immortal for thousands of years and burns when exposed to fire. When the holy tree is ignited, it illuminates the Fox clan, causing their souls to fly away. Therefore, it's the only way to kill Zhao. But there is a slight problem. If the tree is ignited, all the foxes will either die or return to their original form. The revelation causes slight tension among the clan members in the room. However, they eventually decide to proceed with the mission as they have something more important to take care of right now. Following this, the group splits up, with Qianhua and Sumi heading to rescue Helan and Pippi at the station, while Xianju and the assistants search for the sacred tree. Not long after, they find the tree, but unfortunately, they're a bit late. By this time, Zhao is snuck into the police station and is trying to force Helan to hand over the key. Our hero knows that handing over the key will lead to disastrous consequences, so he instead endures the brutal punishment dished out by his brother. Zhao then departs, but promises to return for the key again. Helan and Pippi are successfully released on bail, but he has fallen into a coma. Upon arriving home, she anxiously holds his hand and keeps saying, "I love you." She's devastated to see the love of her life end up like this. Unfortunately, the assistants can't provide any help either, as they know Helan's condition is incurable. He then looks at her for one last time, after which he loses all his magic and turns into a fox. Afterward, Pippi can't stop crying. She blames herself for taking away his powers, which resulted in his demise. Seeing this, the assistants feel very bad, so they decide to transfer all their magical powers to Helan so that he can at least transform into human form. Although he will just be an ordinary person without any memory, they decide to take a chance. Meanwhile, Pippi comes out of the room and cries while describing how fluffy and warm Halan has become. At this moment, the fox demon flower behind her disappears, and she's free to live her life. However, this is the last thing she wanted. Filled with emotions and rage, Pippi decides to avenge Halan. She calls Zhao and tells him that she's willing to give him the key. Unbeknownst to him, she actually plans to use the sacred tree to kill him once and for all. Later, Zhao and Bojong show up outside the house and Pippi looks at them nervously with the sacred tree in her hand. However, Bojong quickly snatches the tree away from her and foils her plan. Zhao then threatens to hurt her family if she doesn't hand him the key. Our terrified heroine runs inside the house and eventually finds the key, but she isn't sure whether she should hand it over to the evil guys. She knows that her family's lives are at risk, but so are the lives of thousands of other innocent foxes. As she contemplates her next decision, Qianhua suddenly appears and knocks Bojong down. She then takes the sacred tree back from him. Zhao angrily watches her from afar and accuses her of doing this for Halan. However, Qianhua explains that she loves Zhao but doesn't want to be with an evil person like him. She then suddenly kisses him, which soothes his heart. After the romantic ordeal, he tearfully explains that he did all of this just to win her over and is willing to die in her hands. Qianhua understands what he's going through, but she also has to make sure that he never hurts people again. Therefore, she lights up the sacred tree, wiping out all the foxes present there. The scene then shifts to 6 months later, where we see Pippi successfully passing the graduate student interview. Jialin has also recovered and is preparing to return to the United States. Elsewhere, we see Xiaozhu working in the coffee shop as usual, and it turns out that Halan's assistants have turned into foxes and are living with her. Everything is slowly getting better except for Halan, who has not been heard from again. A few days later, Pippi is traveling to another city for some work. As soon as she boards the train, she is shocked to see a guy who looks just like Halan on the platform. She tries to approach him, but the man soon disappears. Assuming it must be someone else, she proceeds to her seat. Suddenly, the guy boards the same train, and Pippi is shocked to see that it's actually him. However, this Halan appears to be ordinary with no eye problems, and his memories are also gone. The two then engage in conversation, and he claims his name is Halan. She in turn introduces herself as Pippi and remarks that his name is very unique. She guesses the Chinese character for his name correctly, which surprises him because she's the first person to ever get it right. Pippi then mentions that she's waiting for a very important friend, and he says he will wait with her. And with this bittersweet ending, the drama comes to a close.